screens went blank. Apparently they're sending me a message here. Oh, I think we're back.
Good job.
It seems to be.
You gotta stay there.
I gotta stay in here now? This is my new best friend, David. He's gonna stand there. Did you have some fillings done recently or something, David? Are we seeing both? All right, a little touchy-feely today. Somebody wave if this goes down. I'll save my jokes around 5G connection. Okay, so Leland Stanford was one of the governors of California. Very successful railroad tycoon. And the reason I talk about this is I'm from Arizona, went to Arizona State University, very proud of that, go Devils. Stanford kicks our butt and everything. But I'm going to share this story anyway. His true passion in life, does anybody know? It was actually horse racing, believe it or not. He was a really generous man, founded Stanford University, but he loved horse racing. He couldn't get enough of it. And he was also extremely competitive. He wanted to have the fastest horses in the world. So he did what any of us would do. He hired a Brit with a really big beard named Edward Muybridge, who was a nature photographer. And the prevailing notion at the time, back in before 1873, I believe this was that horses, as they ran at full gallop, always had one hoof firmly planted on the ground. And the human eye was unable to see anything differently. And so if you think about pictures that go back to the Victorian era, as they show horses running, they always have at least one foot planted on the ground. And they didn't believe that this was the case. They had a whole bunch of training programs around that. And Leland Stanford wanted Edward Muybridge to prove that, in fact, at full gallop, horses leave the ground. But they couldn't prove that. And again, the human eye was incapable of doing that. Now, they didn't have 5G, they didn't have IoT, they didn't have AI at the time, so they used the technology they had, which was tripwires and cameras. So they put some tripwires about 3 feet apart on one of the stretches of the track, and they connected those to cameras in that little shed that you see back there. And as the horse would run across and hit tripwires, the cameras would fire in succession. Now, they ran this experiment, and wouldn't you know it, that for the first time, as they collected data, they were able to show, for the very first time, that a horse actually leaves the ground during full gallop. Not only that, you'll notice the way that the horse's legs are pointing. They're kind of tucked back up inside himself, versus going out like he's super horse. If you look at like Victorian pictures of horses jumping over things, they always have their hooves pointed straight out, like they're flying over. That's not how a horse jumps, tucks it up underneath, right? 2 insights that were not able to be gleaned from the human eye, but that revolutionized the way that Mr. Stanford trained his horses. He came up with a methodology that included this insight and a training course from the time that the horses were born that yielded over 19 world records. Just an incredible competitive advantage that he was able to glean from this, that nobody else did. That training methodology, the Palo Alto training methodology, exists today. Started back in the 1870s. That's amazing. Now, what's really amazing, that's not the end of the story. Edward Muybridge, that Brit with the wicked-looking beard, he had a great idea. He took this data and he etched it along the edge of a glass plate. It's a little hard to see. The glass plate is in the middle there. And then he went to the Chicago's World Fair the next year, and he put that plate inside of a little box with a little hole in it, and he shone a light through that, and he spun that plate around, and he charged people a penny a pop to come up and kind of stick your eye in the hole. And this is what they saw. Now, for the first time ever, this was kind of the birth of the industry that we all know and love today, which is the motion pictures, right? The movies. We all love these. Created these great new revenue streams. Why am I telling you a story that's 150 years old about innovation and IoT? There's a couple of things that we learned here that are super important. IoT, edge, whatever you want to call it, it's not about the underlying services and technology. It's not about the bands. It's not about any of that from a business owner perspective. It's about what's going to give me competitive advantage and how do I create new revenue streams. We're going to talk about that throughout our presentation today, and I'm going to keep coming back to that. IoT means competitive advantage, and it means new revenue streams. And in the environment that we're in today, in the global economy, this is more important than ever. It's innovation by and of itself does not matter unless you can tie it to competitive advantage and revenue streams. Okay, so we have these things, we have these actions, we drive these two business benefits. Now let's talk a little bit about the IoT landscape as we've seen it today. I've heard a couple of these stats alluded to be clear, 64 billion devices that are going to be connected by 2025. That's cool, but connecting devices for the sake of connecting doesn't matter. What's more informative and more interesting is the 175 zettabytes of data that will be in existence in the next few years. And that's cool. Data in and of itself is cool. But what's really important is that number that ends with a T. That's $11 trillion of economic value from these types of solutions. And that's important to us, not just as owners of businesses, as employees of businesses, but this impacts the communities where we live, where our kids go to school, how we interact with others, the products and services that we consume as consumers. $11 trillion in economic value. And that's exciting. I don't often get to talk about a number that ends with a T at Microsoft. We're usually just talking about B's. So T is a good one. Okay, what does this mean in terms of greater business impact? $100 million in average increase in operating income for enterprises that are fully digitally transformed. 90% of organizations believe that IoT is critical to meeting their business objectives. 80% of companies have increased revenue because of an IoT implementation, and there's a lot that have failed, and we're going to talk about those too. 56% of organizations have seen improvements in their efficiency and productivity, and 49% of organizations have seen improvements in the quality of the product of their services. These are real statistics, not just from Microsoft, from the industry, and it shows the type of impact that these types of solutions can have. But IoT is easy to say, it's easy to spell, it's really hard to get done. One of the biggest challenges is in scaling. It's really easy to do a proof of concept. We'll talk a little bit about that. My personal view on a proof of concept is if you have a customer that wants to do a proof of concept, stop. You're just wasting your time. Never do another proof of concept in your business again. Change your perception and go to proof of value. Because I will tell you that the technology works. A proof of concept is normally to show someone that the technology works. We know the technology works. You can spend millions of dollars and several years of doing this yourself, but the technology works. What hasn't been, and this was alluded to at the end of the last presentation, is like, what are those apps? What are the scenarios that actually generate value for customer? Don't do a proof of concept, do a proof of value and show where that value comes in. Pardon me. One of the other things that customers have come up with, over 90% of them have said that they've either lacked the internal expertise or infrastructure, or they can't find it in a partner network. They need help. Customers know this, and they're looking at us as the ecosystem to take care of that. This is, I should say, rather than 100%, I should say virtually 100%. Very few enterprises go into an end-to-end solution with a full adoption plan. They don't think about it. It's an afterthought almost. And in my perspective, if you're going to change any type of a business process, if you're going to add a device, you're going to add a requirement to a frontline worker or to a backline worker, whatever that may be, you are changing people's jobs. And whenever you do change, what do you need? You need a plan, right? You need change management and adoption. And that normally becomes somebody else's problem to think about. By thinking about that up front, and by discussing that with customers up front, you actually can add credibility, you become more of a trusted advisor, and your projects have a lot more success of being implemented, and they can scale. And of course, security. I'm only going to touch lightly on security. I have a module where I go on for an hour and a half about security and what we do at Microsoft to help do this. It suffices to say, If you look at the attack front that Microsoft has, we have billions of Xbox users, billions of Office users, billions of Windows users, billions of connected devices. Our attack surface is the largest on the planet, and we have thousands of people dedicated to fighting the various attacks that are out there on a day-to-day basis, and we have learned a ton of stuff. One of my favorite anecdotes about this is about how our Xbox has evolved. Does anybody know how long it took them to crack the original Xbox? It was a matter of hours. If we first launch it, somebody was able to crack in and start replicating the kernel. You then go to Xbox 360. Any idea how long it took them to crack that one? It went to about a month and a half, so a matter of weeks, about 6 weeks, right? By the time we got to Xbox One, you know how long it took them to crack that? The answer is the empty set. They haven't been able to do it yet, right? So we've learned a lot about security of devices and services over that time. Now, by the way, that is not a challenge. I'm not asking any of you to try to hack into the Xbox, okay? That's the reality of our business and our scale at Microsoft is what we've had to learn about that. Security is super important. We talk about that quite a bit. Now, there's an interesting paradigm that happens here with IoT. This is a pretty simple graph that I put together to hopefully illustrate this. And what this is trying to show is that over time, customers get a lot more and more value from IoT as they move up into stages. This first stage here where they connect and monitor, just getting a hello, I'm alive signal from the devices that are out there adds business value to a lot of cases. Some businesses, that's enough. Like if they can just know where their assets are and that they're alive and connected, that's huge value for them. Second is once they start to actually analyze that data, not at a specific device level, but at an aggregate level, you can get all sorts of insights as to what's happening at your business, and you can solve bigger business problems, and you get more value. And then finally, you can have that aha moment, similar to Edward Muybridge and making the motion picture. You can come up with new business ideas. And I see this happen time and time again for those that are in it for the long haul. But the challenge we have is those technical, those organizational, the other types of problems that we see, they occur during that proof of value, right? We're not going to use proof of concept anymore. During that proof of value, you find some really tough challenges, whether it's through security, getting your devices connected, all the complexity involved with the business processes that exist, lack of budget, lack of support, compliance, regulatory issues. The underlying technology works, but it doesn't automatically solve these challenges. Now, if I'm a business owner and I want to get to that value, but I get shut down right here where there's very little, what happens to my project? It's gone, right? It's gone. Now, I'm overemphasizing something that I hope is now obvious to you, and that is that we have to be able to address these concerns early on and be clear with our customers about what's going to happen and what they can expect if we ever want them to get to the real value. If we don't do that, then your pilot, your proof of value is going to end up in something that I like to call the product hall of shame. Right? I'm going to take just 1 minute. This is the entertainment portion of our presentation. Okay? Product hall of shame. Anybody know what that is? That's a Betamax player. Woo! For Betamax? It's fantastic, right? You had VHS versus Betamax. I'm a Betamax guy. Who else was with Betamax? Vastly superior technology, right? Yeah, but we lost. Why did we lose? It was too expensive. We weren't listening to customer feedback. VHS came in that was comparable at a much smaller price point, and Betamax is no more. Sorry, Sony, we messed up. Hall of Shame, New Coke. I am a Coke Classic guy, grew up on Coke, absolutely love it. I know we're close to Atlanta. When New Coke came out, it was ridiculous. Like, who thought of New Coke, right? This was a terrible idea. Solving a problem that didn't exist, giving customers something that they didn't want, right? Next one on there, I'm a Microsoft guy. I'll probably get fired for saying this. This is the Microsoft Zune, right? Now, my kids had a Zune. They loved it. I loved it, but we just couldn't compete. And it was a failed product. I probably could have put Windows Phone up there, which, by the way, I love, for the record. Windows Phone was fantastic. There's a number of other Microsoft products we could put up there. but just so you know, I'm trying to be humble when I say this. However, for how bad these three products were, pale in comparison to the worst product ever created, and that is Cheeto lip balm. Now, I'm a big fan of Cheetos. I'm a big fan of lip balm. You put those together. I mean, how did that one make it off the floor? Just crazy. All right. So the techniques that we're going to talk about now and the examples we're going to talk about, I want to keep you guys off of this product hall of shame. Okay. We don't want our IoT products to show up here. And even if you do fail, you're not going to be as bad as Cheeto lip balm. So just if you remember nothing else, remember that. Okay, let's talk about our vision as Microsoft and where we see the world going. Our CEO, Satya, has been talking about the intelligent cloud and the intelligent edge for several years now. This is a very simplified representation of what this means, but it's meant to highlight a couple of things, and that is in the world that we live in, it's becoming increasingly more connected, and that's not going to go down, that's going to continue to go up. And that interaction of data moving between the edge and the cloud and where computation actually takes place is super important. And what we found is there is no one model. All customers don't want to do processing at the edge. All customers don't want to do data analysis in the cloud. There's a spectrum of where these things need to take place and a whole bunch of technologies that come together to enable that. I've been calling myself IoT for 8 years. Some people call this artificial intelligence. Some people call it edge computing. Some people call it 5G. Some people call it digital twins. And again, we have this term called metaverse that has been used recently. And I want to touch just a little bit on this so that I can give you Microsoft's perspective on metaverse. We actually see there are 3 metaverses, three multiverse. I don't even know what the plural of metaverse is. Anybody know about
I like multiverse.
Multiverse? That starts to feel a little bit like Spider-Man, but I'm with you. There's the consumer metaverse, which we're not going to touch. There's the enterprise metaverse, which deals with how teams work better together and how they collaborate, and we have teams to help do that. But where I focus is on the industrial metaverse, because I think of all 3 of the metaverses that are out there, the multiverse or whatever there are, we actually see real business value today in the industrial metaverse with real cases. This is where the money is. This is where the value is for customers. So my advice to you is if you're going to focus on a metaverse, stay away from consumer, stay away from enterprise, focus on industrial metaverse, the operations that make business money. To give you a slightly different perspective of this and what I'm actually mean, it's a very simple connection. There is a physical world that is in the back and front office of each one of your customers. They do stuff, they sell stuff, they make stuff, they create stuff, they improve stuff, and they have devices that help them do that. That's the physical world. And by connecting and analyzing what happens with those devices, we can create these dynamic digital models where we can train and make our products better and test them before we actually deploy them back into the real world. So this industrial metaverse is a connection of the physical world and the digital world. It does not supplant humans. It doesn't mean that we're all going to be wearing headsets and walking around and in our PJs at home all the time, although that's a pretty good lifestyle for those that can get it. What it means is we can make better decisions. And we can have more information at our fingertips. And this is evident better in this space and in this segment than anywhere else in the world. In essence, we still have to design, build, operate, and optimize our businesses. And we bring human and AI capabilities together to do this. This is what digital transformation is all about. Some people get afraid when they hear about artificial intelligence. I have a different perspective. Personally, this is not Microsoft, this is Chase. I don't think there is such thing as artificial intelligence. I think it's algorithmic intelligence. We just used the wrong word there. That intelligence is going to do exactly what we tell it to do. It's going to run the algorithm that we tell it to. And if we do that smartly and without bias, we will have greater awareness of what's happening around us, and we'll be able to make better decisions. And when I say we, I'm talking about us as humans. AI will not replace humans. AI will help make a lot of our jobs easier by giving us that awareness of what's actually happening and allowing us to make better decisions. Okay? That's my personal view. I don't want robots to take over the world. Don't want to give them knives and flamethrowers and that kind of stuff. So keep that perspective in mind as you think about AI and how that's going to help in your projects. I think we've got a video that hopefully will play here.
Imagine our world today. People, vehicles, businesses, buildings, hospitals, factories, entire cities, and the billions of devices that connect us to this world and to each other. This is the physical world. But what if we can replicate that physical world into its digital twin? A digital twin that is bound to the physical world in real time, that we can experience in mixed reality, that we can collaborate with, that we can run simulations on and find what is important to us, that we can apply AI to learn, predict, and act, to save time and money, to reduce carbon, to preserve natural resources, to improve safety, to bring us all closer. This is already happening today. Across the world, organizations are taking advantage of this new wave of innovation that trends to an interconnectedness that enables the metaverse. Everything modeled in the metaverse mirrors the status of its physical twin, including the interactions and relations between everything else. By applying the power of the cloud, we eliminate boundaries of what this can do. The potential is limitless. We can now track and analyze data from connected environments to identify patterns, trends, and anomalies. We can now simulate any possibility, evaluate outcomes, determine the impact of any change or condition. We can now harness AI to perceive the physical world, to improve and automate tasks, to give superpowers to your frontline workers. We can now give everyone in your organization the power to build apps and workflows, to collaborate with each other in this virtual space, to share and receive expertise at the right time, with the right context in front of you, to move through the physical world and get relevant information about its digital counterpart when and where you need, using mixed reality. The Microsoft Cloud brings these capabilities together with the limitless computing power of the cloud and intelligent devices at the edge, and creates this framework for building immersive and impactful digital twin, mixed reality, and metaverse solutions.
Okay, that's our vision at Microsoft. And you know it's our vision because there's that really intense orchestral music behind it. So you can just tell. That's a vision. That's vision, baby. Woo! All right. So with that vision comes the reality of the world that we're in right now. And whether you talk, again, I don't care what you call this, edge, IoT, AI, 5G, you call it whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me. But that process of gaining insights from what's happening within businesses and plugging those insights back into the businesses to make them more effective, that seems super easy. But the reality is it's very difficult. And so we're trying to drive IoT and edge and these types of solutions to the mainstream by being the platform provider that takes a lot of the plumbing and automates that and makes it secure and makes it such that our partners can create the solutions that they need to. And by the way, we're not leaving them alone in that. We're trying to build those with them to find those scenarios that have the most business value, that protect the most lives, that do the most good in humanity. That's what we're doing at Microsoft. Now, take a click down here, right? Besides just my team's vision, what are we going to do to improve this? Well, on the engineering side, we're building a well-integrated set of services that is already in market today, and we're continually improving those. We want them to be even more powerful and more simple for our partners and for our customers. So that's job number one. We know our role as a platform provider. That's what we're going to do. Number two, the big secret at Microsoft is the power of our ecosystem. That's why we're so great. Almost 500,000 partners globally that develop on our platform that are solving these real-world challenges for our customers today. Our partner ecosystem is the jewel of the Nile. Anybody that wants to say anything different, that's the one thing we have at Microsoft. Okay, Zoom may have failed, Windows Phone didn't go very well, but anyone would trade for our partner ecosystem. It's fantastic. We love our partners and we take care of them. And then the final leg of this stool of our strategy is to be a partner in this digital transformation. We don't do anything alone. 96% of our revenue at Microsoft goes through partners, and we will continue to do that. And we see every one of the dollars of our partners' success as our own success. So this is our vision, how we're going to go operate against that. Just a few names that we've picked and put on here. I wouldn't dive deep into this. There was no way I could put 500,000 names on a single slide. The part of this slide that I want to touch on is that top bar that goes from kind of left to right here, just to touch on the complexity here. Now, I've already met with several partners from last night and this morning who specialize in one or more of these things. But I will tell you, there is not a single partner on the planet, Microsoft included, who can do a true end-to-end solution by itself. I haven't seen it yet. It just doesn't happen. I've met a lot of partners who think they can or who are willing to go learn how to do that. But success for customers in this space requires us to have better peer-to-peer connections across this ecosystem. You might have a strength in device or connectivity, or you might have a very special set of knowledge in an industry. That's great. You need other partners to truly solve this. And across that spectrum, we are focusing on all sorts of things. My personal focus, it was something I mentioned earlier, is adoption and change management. A lot of these IoT solutions, they get to a point where you actually need professional services to help a company adopt all of this innovation and technology. And it's always an afterthought, and that's a mistake. We need more of that up front. Okay, so this partner-to-partner connection is something that we're dedicated to at Microsoft. And if you don't have a strategic initiative within your company to find the right partners to do this end-to-end, that's low-hanging fruit for you. That's free advice from Chase. You get what you pay for, but this one's good. It's true and it's tested. Okay, let's talk a little bit about focusing on business value. And then I think we're going to get to customer examples, which is the best part. So this is my perspective on digital transformation. Business owners, since the dawn of time, since the very first business that was created. Now, I don't know what that was. Anybody happen to know what the first business ever created was? Actually, I just reminded myself, never ask a question that you don't know the answer to in an audience like this, because somebody might actually know and it might not be appropriate. So we're going to just assume that businesses since the dawn of time have had to deal with these four things. They've had to grapple with these four business imperatives, if you will. One is figuring out those darn customers, right? How do I get more of them? How do I have deeper relationships with them? How do I serve them better? And how do I know this? What are the signals that I have that are bringing this back to me? Number two, how do I make sure that my employees are engaged, that I'm getting input from them, feedback from them, that I'm helping them with productivity tools, but not overburdening them with stuff that just doesn't help them? How do I make sure they're in front of customers more, and how do they become more effective? What can I do as their employer to do that? Third one is operations, right? How do I make sure that we're being as productive as possible, as efficient as possible, and that we're able to continually improve in what we do? And fourth, and I list this fourth on purpose, and then you might think that's a little weird, is like, what is it that we actually sell and do? I think that's probably less important than those other three, to be honest with you. But how do we make sure that we have the right telemetry systems in play? How do we make sure that we're constantly revising our own offering and that we have a price right to market, et cetera? Now, those four imperatives are not new. Customers have always had to try to, businesses have always had to try to deal with these things. What's interesting is you look at these, they're separated into silos on the graphic for a reason. And that's because most businesses operate each one of those units completely separate from the others, completely separate, and actually have different information systems that on purpose are firewalled or siloed against those things. So part of creating value is helping knock down these walls between these four things so that information is shared between these four imperatives. At a high level, that's exactly what digital transformation means. It means that your customer interactions are actually helping to drive your product development, that your employee feedback is helping drive efficiencies in your operations and so forth. And bringing those together in a connected way is how we drive value through digital transformation. I'm taking just one example here because I know we're going to be a little bit short on time, but in kind of the industrial IoT space, there are some very proven outcomes that I feel comfortable standing up in front of any customer in any of these industries and saying, yep, we can drive up to 90% improvement in your OEE, which is huge for manufacturers. We can reduce your energy costs by between 5 and 10%. We can reduce your waste and scrap by 5 to 10%. We've got proven workforce transformation stats, increasing your employee efficiency by 10%, reducing the amount of manager time spent on training and in energy savings. Supply chain, you can read these quotes here and you can see the logos at the bottom. These are actual documented results from these customers. And the reason I share that is your customers need business outcomes, and that's great. There might be a little bit higher, they might be a little bit lower. But if you focus on these types of business outcomes based on the industry that you're working in, your overall project has a much greater chance of succeeding. Okay, I'm going to touch quickly on this, and that's bridging the gap between operational technology, or OT, and information technology, IT. This can get nasty. Have any of you seen this in a project before where the OT folks are on board, but the IT folks come in and say, no way, or vice versa? Raise your hand if you've seen this happen. Yeah, this is a big issue. This is a big issue. And we've recognized that. We know our partners have asked for help with this, and so we're doing the best we can. First is to help drive some understanding. Historically, what you see are IoT stakeholders that are worried about security and policies and automation and delivery and governance and all that, and they typically focus on their own data centers and the cloud. That's where they live. Versus the OT stakeholders, which are worried about the lifeblood of the products, your process automation, your condition monitoring. If things go down on the OT side, there's hell to pay, right? The business will go under. And so they think about things not in terms of cloud and data center, but in terms of what's happening at this site, what's happening at that site, what can I improve to make site 3 as good as site 1? And these two groups historically have been separated. Okay? That's the problem that we're talking about. One of the things that we're trying to do is kind of flip the script here and show that if you look at solutions from the constrained device edge through to the distributed edge, through the data center edge, through your access and regional edge, and then the intelligent cloud, whichever cloud service you might be using, that there is a continuum here that starts to overlap itself. OT is really close to the action, where the lifeblood of the customer is happening. You've got the IT edge, which has access to this huge sea of compute and storage and all other types of cloud-based services. So what we're trying to do is, by industry, solve this complexity and bring them together. If you want your project to be successful, you need to have at least 3 stakeholders at the table with you from your first pitch. One is the business decision maker, the person who sees that business value. 2 is who from the OT side is leading that particular department where you're trying to drive that, and you have to have someone from IT. If you don't have those 3 folks there, then at some point your project is going to hit a major roadblock and it will not scale. Now, I see several of you shaking your heads. You've seen this. This may not be new to you, but it's something that I want to reiterate and remind myself of as well. If we don't have those stakeholders in the business from those 3 distinct groups with us, our chances of success go way down. Oh, I just blew past. That's fine. We cover it here. One of our new services, if you're not familiar with it, is Azure Arc. We are recognizing that in the world today, a lot of customers don't want to get locked into a specific vendor. And that includes cloud-based providers like Microsoft. They want the flexibility to go to AWS or Google or maybe even Azure, right? So we've recognized that. And so through Azure Arc, one of our services, we actually enable our customers to manage all of their devices, all of their cloud distributions through a single pane of glass. Now, this is a very smart thing that we're doing at Microsoft, right? If you want to use Amazon, that's great, but you'll still want to manage it through one of our services. That way you can flip the switch and go back and forth and do whatever you want. We recognize that things like open source are important. The vendor lock-in is a concern. And so we want to, whether you're using certain systems and services on cloud, in the edge, do we need to wrap up?
We're aiming at 11:30. So we're 5 minutes over, I think.
I think we go to 12, but
Go to
We go to
12.
12?
Yes.
Ah, good.
okay. I'm a big fan of lunch too. If you guys want to quit now, we can. I haven't even gotten to the good part yet. All right, customer examples. Here's the good part. We're going to blow through these because I know everybody wants lunch. I apologize. I thought we had an hour here, folks. Okay, then we'll slow down. We'll take it nice and easy. All right, AB and Bev. Anybody ever heard of them? Yeah, we talked about the Super Bowl. I'm pretty sure that most of us in this room consumed an AB and Bev product at some point. All right, now they came to us with a big challenge. They're huge, the biggest brewer on the planet. They needed to get some better visibility into what was happening. They didn't have very specific efficiency goals that they wanted to hit, but sustainability was really big for them. It's part of their corporate credo and something that they wanted to do. And they wanted to figure out the insights that they didn't know. I'm not going to talk a lot about what we did with them, but I do want to just read this quote from Jay. By moving to Azure and consolidating data into a single source of truth using Azure Synapse Analytics, we got visibility across our global business. This has helped us to drive operational changes and efficiencies. And in fact, they are now considering themselves to be the brewer of the future. We have a little video here of that. I can't remember if there's orchestral music in this one or not, so let's see.
With more than 200 breweries and 160,000 employees across the globe, Anheuser-Busch InBev is the largest brewer in the world, with an unparalleled portfolio of brands and a global presence with operations in 50 markets. AB InBev is an expert in their field, and their forward-leaning and innovative spirit is leading to new breakthroughs in brewing. Through their digital factory and supply chain of the future initiatives, in collaboration with Microsoft, AB InBev is focused on transforming both breweries and their global operations by empowering their frontline colleagues with digital solutions that enable world-class manufacturing, mobility, data automation, and business insights. It begins with the brewery coming to life with AI, Azure Digital Twins, and the Microsoft Cloud. The brewmaster is responsible for making the best quality beer. She has unprecedented visibility into the brewing process, so she can predict and monitor the complex chemical and biological fermentation parameters required to produce the highest quality product. Frontline operations can remotely monitor critical quality and traceability data from the manufacturing execution systems using the mobile brewery technology built using Azure. With built-in energy and utility management solutions, the digital brewery supports AB InBev's industry-leading sustainable development goals. After the perfect batch is ready to be bottled and shipped, AB InBev extends their digital twin solution to support the packaging line operations to ensure it's done right. These CAN plans are adopting Azure AI and Microsoft Project Bonsai's deep reinforcement learning to deliver line balancing optimization that detects and automatically compensates for bottlenecks in the complex CAN manufacturing operations. At AB InBev, their 100% uptime mindset is enabled through predictive maintenance and global support. A frontline operator can efficiently address problems through remote collaboration with a maintenance technician, ensuring no unplanned downtime of packaging equipment. The perfect beer is packaged and ready. The digital technologies of the AB InBev supply chain of the future minimizes carbon footprint while making sure the right beer gets to the right customer at the right time. This beer's journey is complete, and AB InBev and Microsoft are taking bold steps into the future.
This is an example of a customer that is fully digitally transformed, and their journey has been fun. It's been fun. It's been exciting. Learned a lot more about the beer delivery process than I ever thought I would. Tetra Pak is a similar case. Many of you are probably familiar with Tetra Pak, the largest packager of liquids on the planet. They're amazing. The reason I wanted to share this story, very similar thing. They wanted to go through and improve how they were doing things. This is an example of a customer that had an aha moment. Using some visual analysis at the edge, they're able to see, that's not the best picture there, but you can see a little milk carton there with a dent in there. They're able to kind of find these variants and remove that. weren't expecting was they were able to actually come up with a new product offering for their customers. And rather than leasing equipment, selling service contracts, they're now able, because of their efficiency and their faith in their own processes, they're able to just deliver packaging as a service. And you want a certain number of packages per month, we will guarantee that within an SLA, within an uptime. It's almost like the subscription model of packaging, which they're super happy about, and their customers are happy about it as well. Talk about Hershey's is one of my favorites, and I am trying to accelerate here. Hershey's was one where one of their products is Twizzler. Everybody familiar with the Twizzler licorice? So they make Twizzlers by putting the compounds into this big vat, and it comes out of an extruder. And one of the biggest problems they had was that if the package says there needs to be 16 ounces of, or 1 pound of Twizzlers in there, they have to have at least that, or they get fined by the FDA. Is it the FDA? Yeah, it's the FDA. Now, what they were finding was they were putting in 16.2 or 16.4 ounces in these packages. So a lot of overage, actually. It's a lot of little pieces of licorice that add up over time. And they came to us for help. We didn't know exactly what to do because we are not licorice experts at Microsoft, believe it or not. So we did the best thing we could do, which is throw a bunch of sensors on these extruders and start gathering data from the existing sensors. 23 different sensors on each one of their extruders. We just collected data for 2 months. 60 million data points over 2 months that included temperature, viscosity, water content, rotation, and several other factors. Through those 60 million data points, through some machine learning in Azure, and came up with a predictable model. Now, Hershey's, what they were doing at the time was about every 15 minutes, they would stop production and they would weigh that product manually. And they would make about 12 corrections a day by manually adjusting more water, less water temperature, et cetera, to try to hit that and keep it on. By implementing this system with IoT sensors and automating this process, that went from 12 manual changes to 240 micro corrections throughout the day. And their operational weighing increased by 50%, and each one of their extruders saves $500,000 a year in those little excess bits of licorice. Now, efficiency doesn't really get people all excited. Like, that's not super sexy. But I will tell you, to a business owner, saving him $500,000 on each one of his 14 extruders, that's as sexy as hell. Like, that's really cool, right? For what is in essence a very low-cost solution. Now, this was one of my favorite ones with Twizzler because I happen to be a big fan of Twizzlers. I'm going to tell another one that I don't have a slide for. This is one of the first cases I worked at Microsoft that I like to call the Internet of Cows. We had a customer in Japan who ran a big dairy operation, and one of the biggest challenges they had was in the artificial insemination of cows. They had a success rate of about 64%. That's a very manual process. It's very costly, and they were trying to help us work out how do we do something better there. Again, Microsoft, not really experts in the artificial insemination of cows, believe it or not. That was not something that was on my resume at the time. So we did the only thing we knew how to do, which was put these big orange, essentially pedometers on the cows and just started tracking their movements. We didn't know what we would find, but we were looking at direction and time spent in locations and all sorts of things. Again, a couple of months worth of data, start feeding that through, and through a large aggregated data set, running it through machine learning, we were able to see that the greatest predictor of when a cow is in estrus or heat is the number of steps that she takes. And once it hits 10,000 steps, you have a 3-hour window to perform that artificial insemination. And the success rate went from 64% to over 99%, which is amazing. Now, I was born on a dairy farm. We moved out when we were 3. I tell this story to my dad, and he was like, "You got to be kidding me, all those years." Like, they never knew. 10,000 was the magic number. Now, that was a really cool competitive advantage that these customers had. But if you take that competitive advantage and look at the new business stream that they had, this was the aha moment they had. And that is, we found that if you performed the artificial insemination an hour before that ideal time, you were 95% likely to have a cow. If you performed it an hour after that time, you were 95% likely to have a bull. Now, if you're a herd manager at a dairy farm, the ability to impact whether you have a cow or a bull is huge. That, my friends, is the Internet of cows. Isn't that amazing? That's crazy, right? So whether it's small pieces of licorice or inseminating cows, there are some really cool things that are happening out there. Another one that I want to talk about, this was one of my favorite cases. I can't name the customer here, but this is mining. Again, not an area of expertise for me, but there are 5 important pieces of equipment at this particular mining function. One, up in the upper left-hand corner, is the rock crusher. Multi-million-dollar machine that is amazing at crushing rocks. It just does tons and tons of rocks every minute. The next one is the shovel. You can see a man standing inside of there. There's teeth that come out of that shovel that are about 6 feet long apiece. You've got the bulldozer. You've got your big carriers that are huge. And then the last piece of equipment, which we didn't touch, is the dynamite. Right? These are super, super important to this industry. Now, one of the big problems that this particular customer had was that the rock crusher is really good at crushing rocks, but these teeth from the shovel frequently break off and are scooped up into the dump truck, and then they're driven up to the top of the rock crusher and put in there. And when those steel teeth get in the rock crusher, it shuts the whole operation down. It's an unbelievable amount of money that this customer was losing per hour, over $1 million per hour of productivity every time one of those teeth would break off. It was the biggest problem that they had. Now, the mining occurs down where it's dark. There were other things they were trying to do. They came to us for a solution. What would you do? Anybody a mining expert here? Yeah, a sensor, right? And in this case, we put a cheap camera. Now, when I say cheap, it was less than $100. We mounted it on the outside of where the driver of the shovel sits. So every time that shovel would take a big scoop of dirt and come up, we'd just take a quick little picture with that camera and do some visual analysis at the edge. It was very simple, and all we would do is count the number of teeth. And if one of those teeth was missing, there was an all stop in the mine. Right? The foreman got an immediate message, and they would do an all stop. Now, generally, when you don't see that, it's pretty easy to find because it's right where that shovel is. Right? So very quickly they would find that. They went from spending millions and millions and millions of dollars as maintenance and in lost productivity to almost 0 issues with chewing teeth in the rock crusher. I love this one because when I was a kid, I had the little Tonka car, and going out and visiting this customer reminded me of the little Tonka dump truck. It was awesome. All right? This, to me, is sexy. This is appealing. This is what the promise of IoT is and what the promise of Edge is. And this is happening today. None of what I shared with you is forward-looking, except for that vision on how we're trying to make it simpler. These are real use cases, real value for customers. We have a real ecosystem at Microsoft, and we really, really, really want to work with each of you. We want to know where your strengths are, what your superpowers are, and how we can help partner you with other folks to bring more value to customers. Okay? That's really all I had to talk about today. Just remind you that for over 150 years, the world has been doing the same thing. Just taking a look at things that we can't see with our own eyes, turning those into insights, and giving our customers the benefit of having competitive advantage and new revenue streams. And that's what IoT is all about. Everything else is just plumbing. So let's go work on that plumbing together, all right? I'm going to leave you with my contact information. Everyone will have access to this deck. I'd encourage you to read this one paper here on converging the physical and digital worlds. That'll kind of keep you up to speed on trends that are happening out there. And contrary to popular belief, I think we're actually ending earlier.
Yes.
Promise.
So you've got time.
I've got time. Okay. I'm happy to entertain any questions you might have. I do have to leave exactly at 12 because I've got a flight to catch.